Hey folks, I'm Tom Vasel and welcome to 6 games I played so you don't have to. Now I do want to say this, jumping out the gate here. Often when I do these quick roundups of videos, these are games that I think are horrible. There's 2 here I actively dislike, but the rest of them are just okay. The problem is, I kind of think that in today's world with the board games that we have, that okay board games aren't good enough. But also, I might think they're okay. Lots of people online seem to really like these. So if you do think some of these games are amazing, tell people in the comments, because I can easily be wrong. But let's take a look at each of these 6 games. We're going to start with Intarsia. Now this game, I really was interested in because it's designed by Michael Kiesling, who is best known for Azul and also as part of the great team of Kramer and Kiesling design. This one also looks really amazing. This is from Deep Print Games and Pegasus. And in this game, you're renovating a cafe. But whatever, there's really no theme there. It's a tile placement game. So you're playing over 3 rounds. You're going to place these X-shaped connectors and rings. You're drawing cards of different colors and then using those to place the rings. However, there's a big difference here. You draw cards after you place a ring, but you almost always, in the game rules, draw 1 less card than you've placed. You get a certain number of cards based on how you place them. So you have to think, okay, I'm going to play 3 purple rings to place this, which will let me take 2 cards of a different color, and I'll take 2 orange, which lets me do this over here, and so on and so forth. There's lots of points that you'll get. You'll get points for having these connectors on the board. There's a lot of different, the first person to get 3 orange rings gets this, and so on and so forth. There's these point tiles that you take. It's a really beautiful game. The tiles look great as you place them out. And the card system's an interesting economy. You have to kind of figure out, all right, I'm going to spend this to get these cards. There's even when you spend 4 cards to get the best stuff, it feels you move this thing around the middle and take some cards. I wasn't enamored with that, felt okay, but it's kind of an interesting economy to get into because your hand size is going to shrink as the game goes by. And it's definitely more tactical than it is strategic. There's not a lot of interaction between the different players. And you're trying to get these tiles, and when you take one of these tiles, you get points, but you also get points for any tile you have that's kind of from the same row, but you get tiles for different colors in the same. It's fine. I just don't know that there's going to be a lot of differences from one play to the next. A lot of people are comparing it to Azul. I don't really see it. There's not a ton of player interaction, and you will get better from game to game, I see. But other than grabbing a scoring tile before someone else, there's not a lot of interaction. And while it's interesting, it's ultimately forgettable in many ways. And I don't necessarily think that it's bad, but Intarsia is going to get a 6 out of 10 for me. Very pretty, interesting game that you can play once and be happy. Polaris is a game. One of the 2 designers is Simone Luciani, and I was excited about that. In this game, you are positioning your stars to form constellations and fulfill objections. So the game is pretty easy. There's going to be a row of cards out there, some basic cards and advanced cards. And on your turn, you're going to draw cards, play cards, or take some shooting stars. Shooting stars is kind of a currency in this game. Cards can be played in these different sectors. There's different sectors, and the board rotates after each scoring. So it's going to rotate from around to around, and you're putting out stars and lines that connect these stars, and you're making different constellations. So on your turn, you're going to either take a card. Advanced cards cost some of these shooting stars, or you play them, and you can play as many cards as you want as long as they're in the same sector. Some spots to put cards cost shooting stars, some give you shooting stars. And there's this dawn track that's moving forward, and when you get to the end of the dawn track, there is a scoring thing. There's some common goals at the end, and there's also endgame scoring after you go through 5 rounds. You're trying to build large constellations and things like that. It's a pretty looking game. The stars look nice on the board. It doesn't feel particularly different than other Constellation games. And the rotating board is interesting because I have a card that plays in this sector. Whoa, now this is that sector. And so you have to kind of be thinking about that ahead of time and players have some agency in when they play the Dawn, moving that Dawn track when you're playing cards and doing things that advance that. So you can kind of force things to change, but you have to be ready to do that. With more players, if you played at a full player count, 4 or 3 players, the more players there is, the more the board will fill up, and at the end of the game offers you a lot less choices, which I think some people aren't going to be really a fan of. And following the goals out there is interesting, but at the end of the game, at the end of the day, the game feels a little bit derivative. You're collecting sets of cards to score points, like I said, but it's a little slower than I would like it to be. And placing stars in a spot to get stuff is a little fiddly for how simple the game is. It's fine. There's some interesting ideas here. Putting the stars out looks nice. But I would play it, I guess, but I wouldn't suggest playing it. This is another one of those ones that I think once you played it once, you're like, yeah, that's interesting, and move on. Which is too bad, but again, some folks might like it. That is Polaris. Forges of Ravenshire. Hey, you're in the town of Ravenshire, and it's renowned for its blacksmiths, which apparently are badgers with their tongue sticking out. This is, like I said, there's blacksmiths and weapon makers in town, and hey, the Forge Master's missing, so we need a new one. Can that be you? One thing I want to mention in this game right off the bat is at the beginning of the game, you get an assistant card that gives you special abilities, and these are wildly different special abilities, and there is a lot of rules overhead, and they're like, hey, you don't have to use these for your first game. But then they mentioned them throughout the rules at different points. So you're like, I guess we should use them the first game. And overall, I thought the rules could have been written much better. Those assistants should have been mentioned at the very end of the rules as an extra thing and then told you where they fit in. But what you're doing in this game is there is this production phase, and in this game, you are going to have dice. And during the production phase, the gathering phase, the production phase comes later. You have these 3 dice. You're going to roll these 3 dice. Whoever has the highest goes first. And you will place a die on the board and do that action. Then you'll pull a die off the board and do that action. This is similar to other games. Raiders of the North Sea has the same kind of action thing in it. High rolls are not necessarily better. They often are. I think I calculated out that high rolls were almost always better, but some spots, lower rolls work better for those spots too. And so you're going to do this 3 times. When you pull off the dice, you'll also be placing them on a guild board, which can provide you with extra actions. And in fact, there are ways to upgrade those actions as you pull them back. The second half of each round is a production phase where you'll take these dice, these 3 dice that you put on your guild board, and you're putting them over here and you're producing stuff. You're turning you're turning wood into charcoal, you're turning ore and charcoal into steel, and then you're trying to complete these contracts, building weapons, armor, etc. And you're doing that using the steel, wood, the leather, these things called ember gems, and they are going to give you reputation, golden goods. Essentially, you have to do these to win the game. That's the whole point. And then there's objectives out there that you can score that, hey, the first person to build 4 of this weapon or what have you. There's a decent amount of overhead in the game, a lot to keep track of, and it's a lot harder to get these contracts done than you think, especially the early contract. You start with this, and it's like, this is a small contract, and you go, why? That's a lot of work just to get that first one done. I think they could have scaled that economy down because it just gives you a good feeling to get something done early, and you don't necessarily right away. And I also found that the charcoal, if you want to skip it, you kind of can, because you're trying to get charcoal and iron and stuff to make steel, but there are ways to just get steel just straight out right. And I felt like the production phase is not as interesting as I want to be because it was kind of basic, but it's also done simultaneous. The first phase is not simultaneous, and especially in a 4-player game, there's a little bit more downtime than I would prefer. And because these contracts that you're trying to fulfill get to be so big and so much going on, there's a lot of calculation that you will pause and sit there and think, I can do this, put this here. I need 6 wood and 4 metal and things like that. The production of the game is fine, although it's a little bigger, and that includes the box, than I would prefer it to be, but I like it. And I like the theme of this game. It's an interesting game. I like the idea of making weapons for people and armor. I just wish that it played a little faster and was just a little bit smoother and more refined. I think there is the germ of a really, really good game in Forges of Ravenshire. As it is, I think it's just okay. Another 6 out of 10. Fall of Lumen is a big, gorgeous, beautiful game with kind of this really funky, weird theme to it. You're rescuing these keepers from the inner worlds, and you're infiltrating them on Lumen to overthrow the reign of the Eternals. Yeah, I don't actually understand all that either, but I give them a lot of props for making this exciting theme, and there's a lot of gorgeous artwork and background stuff going on in this game. In this game, there are 6 game rounds, and you're going to be drawing 5 cards, taking these main actions. You have this board that you'll be moving your hero around to do these actions, and there's all kinds of actions. You might be gathering stuff. Wherever your hero is, you might get some resources, upgrading gold and other things, going to a market that lets you change some resources into others. A lot of the things you want to do are on locations around the board, so you need to spend things that give you movement or to get around this board. And I did find that to be a bit restrictive as you went by. But you're also trying to solve challenges, which is their way of turn resources in to get rewards, and some of these rewards are going to be, hey, it's a keeper that you will then free from prison. You will then use that keeper and spend them later on to infiltrate, to put one of your people in a scoring position on a board, with a board with windows, and you're putting scoring people there. You also have cards that are going to let you do a variety of things. You'll be drawing these cards. It's a little bit of a deck builder. You get better cards in your hand. You also have you'll start with special ability, but you'll upgrade and have more special abilities as the game goes by. But the problem is, and I have to be honest here, I don't really like this game. I think the biggest reason for that is that the game just kind of moves at a very glacial pace for me. You get income, but it's not a lot of income between rounds. And the final scores are not very big scores. And getting someone out of prison is a huge amount of work. And then infiltrating the next person also takes some work. And there's these, I got to give it the props. I like the abilities, and I like having more abilities, and I like getting cards and things. But it just felt like everything makes sense, but you're trading this for that, and then getting this, and then that, and getting this and that, and then you get a keeper, then you get them on the board, and it feels slow and plodding. And the map is more of an annoyance because I want to go, I got to mark it, I got to go over there, I want to do this, and I almost, that moving around the map felt like just this extra thing I didn't want to deal with, and it's pretty overwhelming. The setup for this game is very long. There's all these different decks of cards that you need to keep separate, and there's just so much going on, which is cool. I don't mind games with a lot of things going on, but it's a deck builder, but it's a slow one. And like I said, there's too much going on, and it's too little bang for my buck. Again, awesome artwork, amazing theme, but you have to do things in a specific order. There's going to be a lot of analysis paralysis, and sometimes you're going for a specific card on the board and someone else gets it, then you have to pivot, and all the turns you just did seem to be wasted. But at the end of the day, it's just too long, and I don't get to do enough fun things. So unfortunately, I did not like this one at all. I'd give it a 4 out of 10. Defenders of the Wild from T.L. Simmons and Henry Audubon's involved. The original designer did block by block, and of course Henry Audubon's known for a lot of things. This is a cooperative game, and there's a big fantasy story involved in this, where they really went back. There's anthropomorphic animals going around everything, but apparently a secret bunker is open, and these machines and robots are pouring out, and you got to stop it. You are part of a scrappy rebellion. There's 4 different factions. You are one of these factions working together. So you have to rewild these factories. These robots or machines are building factories. You have to turn them back into wild. And you also have to build your camps, which means you need to get your reputation to a certain point to build camps on the board. That's how you win. If 6 factories get built, or there are 6 toxic sites on the board, or if 2 defenders from the same habitat are killed, you lose. So in many ways, it's a typical cooperative game. Get the good things done to win, get the bad things happen, you lose. You're going to basically, at the beginning of each round, you're silently spending an organizational turn. You're all going to be picking a card from your hand and playing them face down. You cannot talk. You mustn't do any kind of communication at all. They once you flip the cards, you can argue and talk and fuss about who goes first and what order. Each card has action points on it. You'll have a certain number of actions that you can do. You can move, build a camp, regroup, clear pollution, heal, destroy a mech, breach a wall. There's all sorts of things. You're also running around. There's going to be these snipers and hunter mechs on the board. You'll roll a die and see what kind of damage you take from them. If you take 3 damage and you're out, but you can heal and keep away from that. The machines are going to run in between your turns with a 7-card programmable deck, which you'll flip it over and it will say what kind of thing they do next. And there's some very fiddly ways to show how they moved on the board. I really disliked how the machines moved with these arrows and stuff. With the hexagon grid, I didn't feel that worked particularly well. In fact, I found the rules themselves to be a little foggy to read through in general. They're not particularly intuitive to teach. And I think this is why I don't like this game much at all. I like the theme fine, the idea of fighting the machines, even if the machines do seem a bit of a spin-off of the stuff that you're fighting in Breath of the Wild. It's just that the game feels like, it feels like Pandemic. It feels like other games. It's like Pandemic on a Catan board. And there's some interesting aspects to it. There's walls, and you got to breach through the walls and get things. But other than that, it feels like it follows all those with a lot of extra rules and a lot of extra rolls of the dice. And the way the cards come out from the robots, sometimes you're just like, well, we just lost. They're all bad card draws in a row, or we got super lucky. And then the rolling of the dice, you live or die off that. And I'm also not a fan of, hey, we're all going to play a card, but no communication. You're like, well, I really hope they do this. I don't know. I don't know why that's forced there at the beginning of each round. So it's like every other Pandemic type of game, but there's restriction. There's walls, enemies who shoot at you. And that combined with a slow, way to finish it off. The game says 30 minutes per player. That is very generous on their part. A 4-player game of this could take up to 3 hours, which I think is way too long. I think the 2 hours that they tell you is too long. So there's interesting ideas in it, but it doesn't feel different enough than a lot of other cooperative games out there. It's too long, too plotting, and too lucky, and the pacing just feels off. So I like the theme, but that's not enough. So Defenders of the Wild gets a 5 out of 10 from me. Galactic Renaissance here. Now, this is from Christian Martinez and from Matago Games. And this is they basically tell you this is a sequel to Inish. So Inish, I originally thought Inish was like the third game in a line of games that were, hey, we have Kemet and Cyclades and now Inish. And Inish felt so different from the other two. Well, lo and behold, Inish is the first of a trilogy of political games or whatever they called it. And Galactic Renaissance is the next one. It is in space. And there's spacey theme, and it's a little bit Isaac Asimov Foundations kind of in space. And hey, there is a Galactic Senate in this very table hoggy game. It's going to take up a lot of your table. There's these objective cards that you need to accomplish to score points. And you're going to have your own deck of cards that you're going through in this game. And you'll have a home planet on the board you'll start with, and more planets are going to show up as you do things. On your turn, you're going to play a card from your hand. And some cards, when you play them, let you play another card. But the thing is, as you play these cards, you discard them to the bottom of your deck. So there's no randomness in your deck as it goes through, although there is some memory required. You're like, when did I play that card? Was it a long time ago or shortly ago? But as they come out, cards often have more than one option on them. You pick which one to do. Others will get played during a disorder phase. In this game, disorder is war. If there's too many of your dudes on a spot on the board, that triggers disorder, which is going to get rid of a lot of different people, and you need to control a lot of these spots on the board to complete objectives. It's kind of an area control. You're trying to get these points. There's one of your cards specifically that you activate that when it comes out, you play it to get points off the objectives. Oh, this objective gives me 3 points, this gives me 4 points, and so on and so forth. You need to get 30 points to win, but this game has a weird rule that once you're past 20 points, you go back to 20. Unless you get to 30. So you basically have to score 10 points on one turn. Like I said, there's a bit of a memory involved in the cards you put in your deck. But I do like the nice aspect of putting those cards in your deck, and there's ways to get better, cooler cards. Although, you do need to realize that a lot of these cards are also a bit of take that. There's a lot of, this is not a solitaire game at all. You're really involved sniping each other and taking each other off. And sometimes you're like, I have to take someone off. It will be you, Joe. The 10-point thing is weird. Having to get 10 points in one turn is weird. So you have to wait for that scoring card to come up. I don't like that aspect of the game. I wish you could have more control because the scoring card's in your hand and you're like, okay, I could score 8 points right now. So I'm not going to play it because I need to score 10. I'm sure there's some, the game mechanism part of this makes sense. It makes no sense thematically, and explaining it to people every time people are like, what is this rule? The component quality is very good. It's Matago, of course. It's a game I can respect in many different ways. It's essentially a race to be the first one done. And it's neat to see the planets and everything go around, but it's just a little too long. It's a little too long and a little too more plotting than I would like it to be. And I don't mind to take that between players, and there's a lot I like about the game, but at the end, it didn't leave me interested to come back too many times. So, I didn't dislike it. I might play it again maybe, but I don't think I'm going to seek it out. That is a 6 out of 10. There you go, folks. 6 different games. Like I said, these are all pretty big games here, and there might be some of you who think some of these games are fantastic. Great! I'm glad you love them. Tell people why they're great in the comments so they can get multiple opinions. Until next time, though, I'm Tom Vasel, and you've been watching 6 games I played so you don't have to on the Dice Tower. Hey folks, thanks for watching another one of our videos. If you like our videos, if you like our channel, you would love to game with us at one of our conventions. Check out Dice Tower Cruise, Dice Tower East, and Dice Tower West. Fantastic conventions where we play games with wonderful people, a humongous library, and lots of other events and stuff. Also, don't forget to check out our channel, like and subscribe. I'm Tom Vasel.